AM Best annual estimate on asbestos and environmental losses for the U.S. P&C industry remained unchanged for year-end 2019. According to a newly issued report, the industry has funded 91% of its aggregate asbestos and environmental exposures, leaving an unfunded liability of approximately $9 billion for asbestos and $4 billion for environmental costs. I'm John Weber for AM Best TV, and here to take us behind some of these figures is the report's primary author, AM Best Director Brian Olarte. And Brian, the report notes that the unfunded liability is a relatively small amount in comparison to the cumulative losses, and that the reserves have diminished. Can you walk us through that loss payment side as it developed over the past decade?
Sure, John. Even though loss payments have outpaced the industry's incurred losses for both the asbestos and environmental, the loss payments has also declined over the same period. In the earlier part of the 5-year period, there have been some sizable claim settlements that mainly were driven by the larger carriers. The large claim settlements has happened over the past 30 years or so, ever so often, which causes the spike in the loss payments. However, over the past couple of years, there hasn't been any large settlements, which has also contributed to the decline in payments.
So what's been driving the decline in annual incurred losses over the past 5 years?
As we are talking about the overall asbestos and environmental incurred losses declining, it's best to look at each one separately. The asbestos incurred has declined at a faster rate than the environmental. One of the main reasons is that the number of years ago, the industry, or should I say the large carriers, have taken a deeper analysis or review of these asbestos exposures. We call this a ground-up study. This review has caused some significant reserving action or strengthening for these reserves. It should be noted that these reviews continue and on a probably every 3 to 5 year basis. That's where we would see some spikes in the asbestos incurred. But the more recent ground-up studies have shown less development or strengthening than in years past. We were expecting this to happen as these companies are getting more comfortable with their exposure. On the environmental side, losses incurred has fluctuated within a narrow band, over the past 5 years. In 2015, the incurred was $800,000, and in 19 it was $600,000, but still at a declining rate. The reasoning is very similar to the asbestos issue. The spikes are driven by the ground-up studies, where we see the peaks in the incurred, and over the past 3 or 4 years, we haven't seen any kind of development, and so the incurred has been declining.
If we could just shift over to the environmental side, Brian, AM Best believes the estimate of $46 billion for ultimate liability is still a reasonable projection. What's the reasoning behind that?
Well, as we mentioned in an earlier part of the report, it's extremely difficult to know what exactly the ultimate losses will be for the asbestos and environmental. But we feel at this time that the $46 billion is the right ultimate based on what we're seeing in the environmental incurred development over the past 20 plus years. Even over the most current 5-year period, the industry's environmental incurred has, as I stated earlier, fluctuated, but at a declining rate. So the incurred pattern is what we're expecting to see a number of years ago, and we feel that the $46 billion will be a good number for a number of years.
Now, finally, Brian, the report places a potential new exposure on the A&E horizon, which pertains to a pair of food additive compounds, the primary one of which has been in use since 1947. What development has brought this into play?
Well, as an analyst at AM Best, we constantly look for what could be the next asbestos or in the industry, the big unknown. Well, these two additives, the BHA and the BHT, caught one of the analyst's eyes. Similar to the asbestos, where asbestos was an excellent electrical insulator, for many years it was used for building materials. But they started seeing some health concerns, just like we're seeing in BHA and the BHT. However, so far there has not been many, if at all, any coverage issues or litigation issues. But we're going to keep an eye on this. This could be the next big unknown.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you.
As AM Best Director Brian Olarte. You can find the full report online at ambest.com. For AM Best TV, I'm John Weber.